Welcome to Creating the Future, an Ullman Group presentation. We're spotlighting the visionaries who are driving progress and sparking positive change in Dayton and beyond. Today we're joined by Tim Mislansky. As president and CEO of Wright-Patt Credit Union, he spent his career building hope and improving the well-being of what is now over 500,000 WPCU members in Southwest and Central Ohio. As the leader of the largest credit union in the state, Tim's successful career path is built upon dedication, empathy, and a strong will to serve. We're creating the future. With Tim Mislansky. And the future starts now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Creating the Future. I'm David Bowman.
And I'm Evelyn Ritzy.
And today we are joined by Tim Mislansky, President and CEO of Wright-Patt Credit Union. Founded in 1932, Wright-Patt Credit Union is a member-owned, not-for-profit financial cooperative serving Central and Southwest Ohio. In fact, it is the largest credit union in Ohio, with over 500,000 members strong, myself being one of them.
Me too.
Evelyn as well. So
Me too.
So, three, yeah.
Yes.
So look at that. We're excited to have Tim on the podcast today, hear about how he's using curiosity and creative thinking to lead Wright-Patt Credit Union in its mission to help people through life. So, Tim, let's dig right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. This podcast is really all about highlighting how people use creativity to think differently, to solve problems in unique ways. And at first, a lot of people might not think of financial services as creative or might not want financial services to be creative at first instinct. But we know Wright-Patt Credit Union is very creative and has always done things a little differently than a traditional financial institution or a bank. So tell us a little bit about Wright-Patt Credit Union's philosophy as a credit union.
Yeah, so I think a good place to start really goes back to the origin. So you mentioned 1932. And a lot of people love a good origin story, and I love to tell our origin story. So if you go back in history in 1932, before there was a Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, there was this area called Wright Field, which became part of the Air Force Base. And a little bit of the story there might be a little bit of inaccuracy because it's a 92-year-old story and it's been passed down over generations. But the story goes that there was an individual who worked at the field, worked in the machine shop because they worked on planes there. And we don't know if he got hurt or he got injured, but he wasn't able to work. So if you go back and you think about high school, American history, 1932, peak of the Depression. There was no such thing as disability insurance. There was no such thing as unemployment. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. And if you didn't get paid, you had a hard time putting food on the table for your family. So this gentleman wasn't able to work for a period of time, and his coworkers came together and they decided that they were going to make him, give him some money. So when they got paid one day, they all took a quarter, and 22 of them came together and gave him, do the math, $5.50. And that helped stabilize him and his family and feed his family until he was able to come back to work. And when he came back to work, he said, I want to pay you guys back. And so every week he paid back a quarter. And at the end, they took that money and they put it in a shoebox. And what they did from there is every week, every employee put a quarter in. And then when somebody in their workforce or in their plant had a hardship and needed help, they voted and made a loan out of that. And that's how Wright-Patt Credit Union came to be 90 years ago. And when you think about that, and you think about it from a creativity standpoint, back in those days, if you didn't have money, it was tough to borrow money. You needed to have money to borrow money. Sure. And so it was a very different and unique solution to solve that individual's problem. And that's really what Wright-Patt Credit Union still does today. We do it with a lot more than 22 members, over 500,000. We do it with a lot more than $5.50. But that purpose, that core of who we are about helping people, and you mentioned our mission statement, is still the same and carries forward into what we do today.
Mm-hmm.
I love that story and how it shaped what the credit union is.
It's a great story to tell.
Since we have you on the podcast today, and you and I got to know each other pretty well through the Chamber's Leadership Dayton program, which was great to work, with you on the client side, but also get to know you better from that standpoint. But for those that don't know you as well, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be in the credit union world?
Yeah, so my story is often a story of being in the right place at the right time and having mentors and leaders who gave me opportunities. So I'm originally from Cleveland, went to school at Miami University just down the road from here. And when I was at school at Miami, we had something rather unique. There were only about 20 of them or so in the country, but we had a student-run credit union. So it was a fully regulated, federally insured, federally chartered financial institution that served the students of Miami University. And I got involved with that and started volunteering there. There were about 70 of us at that point in time who were volunteers. So nobody got paid. It was a great resume builder, and people generally got good internships and good jobs because of the experience. But we ran a financial institution. We were also kids. And
that's pretty wild.
Didn't know a lot of things. So it was kind of this grand, goofy experiment that sometimes had not so good results because we would do something that we didn't know was a regulatory violation because, again, we were college kids. But it was a tremendous learning experience. And through that, we had a group of advisors that were credit union professionals, people who had full-time careers. And that's how I met a number of leaders in the Butler County area, Hamilton County area. And one of those was a gentleman named Doug Fecker, who was my predecessor at Wright-Patt Credit Union. So I've known Doug since I was about 20 years old. And when I graduated, and I love to tell this story, and I love to make Doug blush a little bit when I tell the story, is that when I graduated, I applied for a job at the credit union he was at to work for him, and he didn't hire me. So that was back in like 1993, but one of his peers hired me in the management trainee program. So I worked for that credit union for about 8 years and worked with Doug for a few of those. And then when he came up to Wright-Patt and made the transition, and then he became CEO, he called me and we had this 3-hour lunch at an Olive Garden in Middletown. And a few weeks later, I was working for him up at Wright-Patt. And that was 23 years ago. So credit union was very different back then, significantly smaller in terms of the number of members we served. I think we served 150,000 members. I think we were $500 million in assets, and we're getting close to being $9 billion today. So it was really different. And I've had roles such as running our subsidiary, running our financial planning area, being the chief lending officer. My last role before I had the fortune of becoming president and CEO as chief strategy officer. So I've gotten to see the credit union from a lot of different vantage points, and it's just been a great career for me.
And that brings us to today, where in your role as CEO and president. So how would you describe your leadership style, and how has that shaped the culture of Wright-Patt Credit Union?
So a couple things I always talk about when people ask me what type of leader I am. So one of the things that I always start with, and I think it's core to who Wright-Patt Credit Union is and why my personal values have aligned with the credit union's values, and that's what's made it such a great place to work and a fulfilling career, is this idea of helping others and helping people and being a servant leader and trying to find ways to give people opportunities to develop, to grow, to do new things. And so that's a big part of it. And so it's that servant leadership aspect from a leadership perspective, and also just being a servant and taking care of others. And so again, that aligns and ties directly back to the mission statement of the credit union, that we help people through life. The other aspect I always like to talk about is my favorite business book is a book called Start With Why, by a guy named Simon Sinek. And you guys smile and nod your heads because I assume you've read it. It's a fantastic book. And when I first saw the TED Talk video, and I'm like, this is really cool. He enunciated things that I felt in terms of the way I led and wanted to lead. And so the whole premise behind it is, if I paraphrase, is that consumers and people don't work for you or do business with you because of what you do. They do it because of why you do it. And so that's been really profound as I think about the credit union and think about what do we want to be, where do we want to go, who do we want to serve. We start with that why of what's our purpose, why are we here? And we're really here to build hope for people. That's a big part of our purpose statement. And so those things have just really aligned well. And I think the other thing, and this relates to the creativity topic, is I like to be a big thinker. I like to think about where could we go, what could we do, and kind of push the boundaries. And in reality, it's tough to get to those boundaries. But if you start way out here, or if you aim for way out here, and you're starting from this standpoint, if you get to here, you've made a lot more than just incremental progress.
Yeah.
And so those are really three aspects of how I think about leadership and in terms of my sense.
I think something else that, knowing you a little bit, that jumps out at me, and I've heard you talk about it before, but is the role of empathy. And again, when you think of a financial institution, a multi-billion-dollar financial institution, people wouldn't typically think of like empathic, caring, but that's a core part of when I've heard you articulate your why. It often starts with because members need this, or and talk about the importance of empathy as you're creating this future of the credit union, or this culture. Like, what role does empathy play?
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that, because we talk a lot about taking care of people at the credit union. I actually have a construct that I use. Our marketing team has dug Tim's circle, and we start with our job, whether you are someone who works in one of our member centers or the call center or has direct contact with members, is to take care of the members. They're the reason the credit union exists as a financial cooperative. The only reason we exist is because 500,000 people trust us to take care of their money these days. If you're in a job that isn't in the front office, that you're a support role, say you work in IT or human resources, your job is to take care of the people who take care of members. And so at the core, and I like to try to simplify messages, is your job is to take care of people. When you walk in the door, that's what I ask you to do. Take care of people better than anybody else does. Because what we know is that when we take better care of the members, and empathy is a big part of that, the members will take better care of their credit union. They'll tell their friends and family about us. They'll tell their coworkers about us. They'll bring their kids in to open accounts. I can't tell you how many stories I hear from people in the community about, I've been a member since I was 8 years old when my dad brought me in, because he used to work on the base, and that's when I became a member. I mean, those are just cool stories to hear, and they show the impact we make. But when we take better care of the members, they take better care of the credit union, and then that gives us more resources to take care of more members and to take better care of our partner employees. And so it becomes this circle that continues to, I'll say, roll downhill and gain steam, so to speak.
It's fantastic.
And someone that's been in your role since 2021, I believe, is that correct?
2022.
2022.
Yeah, so it's been almost 2.5 years. Just over 2.5 years.
During that time, what have been some of the highlights or some of the milestones that have really made your time special?
No, I could talk for a lot longer than we have because in my role, I get to see people do amazing things every day for our members. The things I'm most proud of are the individual stories I'll hear. For the impact that one of our employees made on a member, and sometimes there are things you could never write in a job description for someone. About how they've gone out of their way to go above and beyond. Stories where a member traveled to the credit union on a Greyhound bus once to sign papers, and the employee tried to drive them home. The member wouldn't let them do it. But to think that an employee in Dayton, Ohio, would drive a member back to Cleveland because they didn't want him to take a Greyhound bus, that's pretty incredible. So I'm most proud of the impact we make on people. Because at the end of the day, it's cool to say we're the largest credit union in Ohio. It's cool to say we've got nearly $9 billion under management of our members. But what's really important to me and what I want our legacy to be is the fact that we impact 500,000 people's lives. And we do that with financial services. And so one of the things I love, and we've talked about how can we track this, because I just think this is really cool, is we talk about crying moments. So when I go out to a branch or what we call member centers, I'll ask the people, how many of you have made a member cry recently? And that sounds really odd. And they know I'm asking, and not from a bad way. It's not like we said, David, you're denied for a loan and you cried. It's because either we did something for the member, we said yes to something they wanted or needed, or we helped the member do something that they didn't think was possible. Yeah. We helped them buy that first house. We helped them buy that new car they wanted to. We helped them recover from some bad financial decisions they made in the past. We helped them send a kid to college. That's what I'm most proud of. And then I could go on and talk about some of the specific programs, so I'll maybe mention two of them that, again, I think relate back to this creativity theme. Is that about a year ago, we launched a small business lending initiative that was specifically targeted at trying to help women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses overcome I'll call them systematic hurdles in financial services to start a small business or to take that small business and maybe take it up a notch.
Yeah.
And so when we started that, we realized, well, none of us are small business owners. We should probably talk to some. And so we met with a lot of members. We met with a lot of non-members, and we heard their stories about how they got started, what their challenges were from gaining access to capital or getting a loan or growing. And then we also met with community leaders and nonprofit leaders who provided some of these services. And through that, what we built was this program we call SOAR. And what we did is we allocated a specific amount of dollars towards it for small dollar loans, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 loans to help a business either get started or move to the next level. And we've helped over 300 businesses. About $7 million have been loaned out through it. And then the other aspect that I think is really cool to it is that in the way we evaluate the credit requests, there's some traditional underwriting, but we've also built some different things into it as what we see ourselves are. And we're part of the economic engine here in Dayton and in Columbus. And so if they would commit to creating a job, they got extra points in their underwriting analysis. And so we have commitments from those 300 businesses that they'll add 400 new positions to the labor market. So again, looking at things from different lenses, thinking about it, not just from our perspective and realizing that we come at it from a different angle because of our backgrounds and our careers, and talking with women who were business owners, talking with veterans, talking with minorities, and understanding it from their perspective.
Well, I love that too, because again, it's very counterintuitive, but it's built on a premise that isn't how much capital can we extract from the people who live around us. It's how do we take the capital we have and reinvest it and lift people up, particularly those who really need that help, and build a stronger community under the auspices that, hey, if we're doing that, it's going to help us anyways in the long term.
Yeah,
right?
it's going to help all of us in the end. Because if there are more good-paying jobs in the markets where we operate, people have more disposable income, people have the ability to borrow more, people have the ability to pay their loans. And so while it is not a direct impact to us necessarily, there's a huge indirect impact.
Yeah, and that ripple effect is just massive.
Yeah.
So that segues perfectly into the next question I had, which is, something that's really special is your commitment to making a difference in communities. And one of the big ways that you've done that is through the Sunshine Community Fund. So talk a little bit about what the Sunshine Community Fund is, how it's evolved, and how it's, what it's doing today and into the future.
Yeah. So the Sunshine Community Fund is the credit union's charitable giving arm. It's a separate 501c3 foundation, so contributions to it are tax exempt. And where it really started, it was more of an internal program where we galvanized and mobilized our employee base to raise money for causes that were important. And the credit union would match some of that. And so what we've built over time, and we now call it the Inspiration Committee, and the RAY and inspiration is capitalized to tie back to sunshine. I didn't realize that until someone pointed it out to me. I can be a little bit dense sometimes on things like that. But what this committee does is they hold a variety of fundraising activities throughout the year for our employees. Some of them are, like a 50-50 raffle type event, or or 2 years in a row, I had a 100-yard dash race with another employee, and people placed bets, so to speak, on who would win. I lost both years, I'll say. And then Kyle decided to retire from it, so he's concerned that I could beat him in the future. And we do a Winter Wonderland drawing where people contribute gift baskets and gift cards and so forth. And we raise a lot of money, nearly a couple $100,000 through that program. That comes out of employees' pockets. And then what we do is we let the employees decide through a committee where to grant that money. So we have a grant application process. Nonprofits in the communities that we serve submit grant applications. They're evaluated. We come up with a list of finalists. This inspiration committee vets those, and then we let the entire employee base vote on them to decide where the money they gave gets to go. And all of them tie back to some element of people's financial wellness. Things around job stability or job improvement, things around youth development, education. So it's things that will uplift people financially. And again, it's just kind of cool to sit back and say, a small group of people put this idea out there, and then this large group of employees have just run with it and built it beyond what we thought. And then on top of that, the credit union actually takes 1% of its income per year, its net income, and gives that to the foundation to use for areas that it deems to be important. And the two focus areas today are on financial education. We do a lot of work and are looking to do even more work with the schools in our communities and trying to get and help teachers provide financial education earlier in life to people. Because up until a number of years ago when a law was passed in the state, there wasn't a lot of financial education done in the high schools. And so you could easily fall prey or victim or make bad financial decisions. And if your parents made bad financial decisions, odds were you were going to make bad financial decisions too. So we've built a program we call Money Magnifier. We have used interns to help us develop those programs, and we provide kits to school teachers to teach classes on financial education. We go out and teach classes, and a meaningful amount of the money the credit union gives to the foundation goes to that. And then the other aspect, and it's kind of in its early stages, is really around homeownership. So a lot of my career at Wright-Patt Credit Union has been spent on the mortgage side. I'm very passionate about that. I'm a big believer that when communities have high rates of homeownership, they're stronger communities, they're more stable communities. They're a great way for most Americans, and even the best way for most Americans, to start to build some type of wealth, to start to build equity in their home. And so we really take a lot of pride and emphasis on homeownership. So we have a Bright Star grant. Again, the bright relays back to the sunshine, where we give grants out to first-time home buyers. And we're really talking about some things from a partnership perspective with some community organizations to, I'll say, accelerate homeownership opportunities in some of Dayton's neighborhoods.
Yeah, and that's critical. I mean, for a lot of folks, they may even have capital for the monthly mortgage payment, right? Or all of the standard things. But coming up with 8% to put down up front, like that's a massive hurdle.
Yeah, the down payment hurdle and the closing cost hurdle.
Yeah, and helping people through that is just so powerful in terms of, again, being creative and removing barriers.
Right, exactly.
I love how perfectly that ties back to Wright-Patt Credit Union being a purpose-driven organization, and we mentioned start with why. But I did want to bring up the purpose statement that you introduced this year, the fact that everybody deserves a caring financial partner who builds hope and improves well-being. For you personally, how does this translate to your life? What builds hope for you? What inspires you?
Yeah, so I'm really, that's another thing I'm really proud of, because we spent a lot of time, and we're very purposeful, as corny as that sounds, purposeful about creating a purpose statement. We wanted something that was unique to us, that felt like it came from the organization's soul, so to speak, and that wasn't something that people read who were employees and said, well, that doesn't sound like us. That sounds like we're trying to be something different. And thanks to the incredible work of a lot of different people on our team and a lot of input from people at various levels, when we rolled it out, the response from employees was, well, you nailed it. That's right on target. That's who we are. And so that's exciting that when you can put those words down on paper and you get that buy-in. Because if I had walked around the credit union and said, what do you think our purpose is? It would have always been around those themes that we take care of people, we build hope, that goes back to when we make people cry. But to capsulate it where we're all kind of singing from that same sheet's important. And why it's important to me is that, I'm struck by a number of things, but one of them, and whether it's in this market or it's in Ohio or it's nationally, is this, I'll call it this growing disparity between the haves and the haves not. More and more Americans are having trouble meeting basic financial needs. There's statistics out there that say 40% of Americans couldn't come up with $500 for an emergency car repair if they needed to without going to borrow that money. That's stressful. That's, that conversation at the dinner table between a husband and wife or two partners talking about what bill don't we pay so we can get the car fixed? Because if we don't get the car fixed, we can't drive to work. And if we can't, you understand the dynamic of that. And so the credit union is a platform, so to speak, for, I think, trying to help people solve those problems and giving them that economic hope and the tools so that they can be better off financially. And I don't mean that we're going to make everybody rich. That's not the idea, and I don't think everybody has this goal of I want to be rich someday. We just want to help people live a life that they want to lead and be able to do the things that they want to do in life, provide for their family, provide for their kids, take a vacation, be able to view a retirement someday that isn't this object out there that isn't feasible because they'll never have enough saved for it.
Yeah, and I almost think of it sometimes as, like the long train of dominoes, right? That, you're always sort of trying to add that next step. And you guys are really wonderful at how do you make sure there's enough space between them that if one falls over, it doesn't go all the way back in this.
That's a great analogy.
Right?
I'm going to steal that. So yeah,
it's all yours.
Yeah, so it's the aspect of resiliency.
Yeah.
How do you weather life's financial storms? Because there will be storms.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, the car will break down, the refrigerator will go out, the hot water heater. You'll have things that happen in life that you need that caring financial partner to help you through those, and that's where we come in.
So that brings us to our last question, which I think that's a perfect way to get there. But the podcast is all about creating the future and people who are working that. But what's the future you're hoping to create here in Dayton?
Yeah, it encapsulates a lot of the things I've talked about today. Is that that we're on I don't mean on a corporate standpoint or a business standpoint, but that from an individual standpoint, we're more economically viable. That there's a smaller gap between the haves and the haves not. That there are more, and when I say safety nets, I'm not necessarily talking about government safety nets, but that people have built safety nets for themselves around how they can be financially successful regardless of what's happening in their life. Because what we know, if I tie this to some other things, is that when you've got money problems, you've got health problems. Because when people worry about money, it impacts their mental health, it can impact their physical health. And so this idea that if we can help people build resiliency with savings and emergency savings, if we can help people become homeowners, that builds community and builds resiliency. If we can help small business owners grow their businesses and employ more people and do the things that are important to them, we can, almost one by one, help uplift this community. And that's really what we're trying to do, because at the end of the day, when we talk about impact, we talk about it from a people standpoint.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here to do.
And I think that's so powerful in that it's just, what you're talking about is just people helping people, right?
It is.
Overcome a challenge and how that grows and cascades and builds.
Exactly.
Just
exactly.
Well, Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun. These are always a little bit intimidating when you get asked to do them, but you guys made it nice and easy.
Everyone
so,
can be intimidating sometimes. So.
I've noticed that. No, I'm teasing. So, yeah. So, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Creating the future. Creating the future. Thanks for listening. Creating the Future is a presentation of Ullman Group, a full-service advertising and marketing agency helping our clients create the future for over 75 years. Executive producers Evelyn Ritzy and David Bowman. Director and video editor Jason Carter. Audio editors Jim Hosfeld and John Brooks. Graphic and motion design Megan Murphy and Cody Rain. To hear and view other episodes and learn more about the Ullman Group, visit ullmangroup.com/podcast.